Joke's on you, Frank. I own no Apple shares. And I say the joke's on you. That would have been probably a smart thing for me to do. Hey, everybody, how's it going? Rolling in dough. Man, there are many places I can point to where that ended up very much not being the case. Or very much, yeah, whatever. Anyway, I thought about talking about, I'll probably talk about that at the start of the show, how I own no Apple shares, which was, ridiculous. But anyway, who's here? Well, John's here because he's doing the roll call. Roger, Matthew D, Jeff, Vern, Brian, Hank, Deborah, Webb, Rob, Tim, Frank, Paul, Chuck, Sloth Bear 2, The Quickening, Donna and Andrew. Hey, everybody. How are ya? Good to see you. Right. Sure. Why don't we do a thing? It's right. Okay. I'm recording actually. I'm not going to start recording. I'll just go ahead and go. How are y'all? Oh, and Derek is also here. Hi, Derek. And Amy. I don't think Amy. Okay, Amy says go. So I got to go now. Talk to you tomorrow. Hold on. Okay, now I think we're ready. Whatever. I'll look at Apple's first quarter fiscal year 2021 numbers. It is Wednesday, the 27th of January, 2021, and this is macOS Can Live. I say we're looking at the numbers. We will look at the numbers. Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Ray, host of, oh golly, lots of things. macOS Ken, which of course is a daily Apple news and news related to Apple news show that started 15 years ago this week. And then there's this thing that we do, which is macOS Can Live, where we talk about things, sort of in a more rambling, sort of a more wandering, sort of a more, what's the word I'm looking for, editorial way than we might on macOS Can. Happens every Monday through Friday, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, other times, other places. You can join us live, youtube.com/KenRay. And let us begin. There was, I wondered actually if I shouldn't have said that we're going to look at Apple's numbers, because we are going to look at Apple's numbers. But what's interesting to me is the rhetoric. What's interesting to me is, what the various executives, well, all two of them, and really I mostly listen to Tim Cook. What Apple has to say about Apple is interesting to me, and the stuff that Apple has to say around Apple is interesting to me. The numbers are also interesting, but for me, what's been fascinating about Apple is the story. That's why I get frustrated sometimes with analysts who say, why don't you, how couldn't you, did you ever think of? Because, and I'm talking about Tony Sacconaghi, because there seems to be an inability to imagine there. And I don't want to say an inability to believe, because there's no reason to believe any company, I don't guess. I don't know. Like I say, it's the rhetoric that interests me. The numbers are interesting because they're sort of like not how the story ends, but where we are in the story, I think. Because I think I've made this clear before, but in case I haven't, I own no Apple shares. I own no Apple shares. Which I guess on the one hand feels crazy, because I think of all the money I could have made over the past several years if I had owned Apple shares. At the same time, I probably wouldn't be doing macOS Ken, because then I think Tony Sacconaghi, rather than just driving me crazy as a sort of a thought exercise, would drive me crazy. I think everything that anybody said about Apple would drive me insane. And so instead, I get to stand on the side and say, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that doesn't make any sense. And continue to be poor. Good thinking. Oh, but I can sleep at night, except for this thing with my shoulder. And also, I don't sleep at night. Right. Let's talk about numbers, and then we'll talk about sentiment as well. Apple hit an all-time record revenue of $111.4 billion. That was up 21% year over year. Remember when people said, yeah, they're probably going to break 100 billion? Yeah, they crushed 100 billion and moved on from there. Earnings per diluted share were $1.68. That was up 35% year over year, and well ahead of, I think, anybody's expectations. International sales accounted for 64% of this quarter's revenue. Tim Cook did that thing that I love that Tim Cook does every time. He thanked employees and he thanked employees and he thanked employees again. Starting off in the press release, this quarter for Apple wouldn't have been possible without the tireless and innovative work of every Apple team member worldwide. We're gratified by the enthusiastic customer response and all that stuff. We'll get to the phones, we'll get to the Macs, we'll get to the iPad, we'll get to all of that. Yeah. Revenue from products was $95.6 billion. That was up from $79.1 billion a year ago. Revenue from services was $15.7 billion. That was up from $12.7 a year ago, for a total, as I say, of $111.4 billion, up from $91.8 billion a year ago. Sales in all 5 geographies that they track were up double digits, from 41.3 billion in the Americas to 46.3, from 23.3 to 27.3 billion in Europe, from 13.5 billion to 21.3 billion in Greater China, which is a fascinating story, from 6.2 billion to 8.2 billion in Japan, and the rest of the Asia Pacific from 7.3 billion to $8.2 billion. iPhone saw an increase in revenue of 17% to 65.6 billion. The Mac saw an increase in revenue of 21% from 7.1 to 8.7 billion. The iPad saw an increase in revenue of 41%, up from 5.9 billion to 8.4 billion. And wearables went from 10 billion to 12.97 billion, an increase of 30%. I did not catch the percentage on the services revenue growth, but it was up from $12.7 billion to $15.8 billion. When he got to his prepared speaking remarks, Tim Cook again, gratitude to the employees. And the call only ended, 30 minutes ago? So my thoughts are kind of scattered all through here. He talked about the fact that there is now an installed base of Apple products of over 1.65 billion units, 1 billion of which are iPhones. The installed base for iPhones is over 1 billion at this point. He went so smoothly from wearables into services that I kind of missed that that's where we were going. Talked about the fact that wearables revenue was up 30% year over year, moved from there into Fitness Plus, which of course leads right into services, which of course, yeah. There's a lot in the call that is about not only gratitude for employees, but Apple's place in the world. And that is not, we're lords of all we survey, but okay, we're the most popular company on the planet, the most valuable company on the planet, and the world is hurting right now. We need to do stuff for it. Some of that stuff comes in the form of business things. Like they talked about the fact that at the first of the year, the very first of the year, they started the Apple Small Business Program, which is the thing basically where up until December 31st, if you had an app in the App Store, you were paying Apple a 30% commission on sales or subscriptions, no matter how much money you made. Beginning with the 1st of January 2021, if you make under $1 million a year from your app, then you're only paying 15%. And that is a thing that he says they've already heard from people who say they're seeing a benefit. Not quite sure how, because it hasn't been a full month yet. Then again, I don't know how the App Store pays out. I guess I must have known at one point because I've had a couple of apps, and yet I don't know how that pays out. So, okay. I want to get to the rhetoric, I think, because that to me is the story. Should I do that or should I do other stuff? We'll do the rhetoric from Tim Cook, and then I'll ask you to listen to something else sometime, and then we'll come back and do the questions and answers. Particularly after the events of the last few weeks, said Tim Cook, we're focused on how we can help in a moment of great national need, because none of us should have any illusions about the challenges we face as we begin a new chapter in the American story. Hope for healing, for unity, and for progress begins with and depends on addressing the things that continue to wound us. In our communities, we see how every burden, from COVID-19 to the resulting economic challenges to the closure of in-person learning for students, falls heaviest on those who have always faced structural barriers to opportunity and equality. After Apple's REGI announcement, the Racial Equity and Justice Initiative, Apple, after their REGI announcement about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I got an email from somebody who said that they're really not fond of programs that rely on race to offer opportunity. I'm guessing it was a white guy. I'm guessing. I don't know for certain. I mean, what he says right there is absolutely true. I mean, there were areas of the country, regions, segments of the population that were disproportionately disadvantaged before all of the little stores closed in their neighborhood. Before they couldn't, before all of this. So he went into talking about Reggie, talking about the Propel Center in Atlanta, and talking about the Apple Developer Academy that's going into Detroit. He then shifted to the stuff that Apple and the employees have done. I mean, he talked about the amount of money that Product Red has generated over a number of years. He also focused on the donations from employees of Apple in terms of both money and time. Of course, a lot of that is matched by Apple. And so, there's hey, there's hardship. Hey, here's some of what Apple's done. And you think, oh, well, he's patting himself on the back. Except, no, he's not. As proud as this makes us, he said, we know there is much more to be done. Looking forward, we continue to contend with the COVID-19 pandemic, but we must also now work to imagine, what we will inherit on the other side. When a disease recedes, follows. Even now, we see the deep scars that this period has left on our communities. Trust has been compromised, opportunities have been lost, entire portions of our lives that we took for granted, schools for our children, meetings with our colleagues, small endured for generation, have simply disappeared. It will take a wide effort across the public and private sectors as individuals and communities, every one of us, to ensure that what's ahead of us is not simply the end of a disease, but the beginning of something durable and hopeful for those who gave, suffered, and endured during this time. At Apple, we have every intention to be partners in this effort, and we look forward to working in communities around the world to make it possible. That's what's interesting to me about the Apple story. Not just the fact that they're out there saying that they want to do good. What's interesting about the Apple story is the story. The phones are great. The iPads are great. The Macs are great. And we'll get into, like I said, we'll get into some of that in just a moment. The story around Apple is it's just a fascinating story in a way that maybe if I followed Ford, maybe if I followed Tesla, maybe if I had followed BlackBerry, maybe I would see that same sort of thing. But there's a I don't know, there's an ethos or something around Apple. And let me remind you, I'm not saying that so their stock does anything, because I own none of it. I will say, the better the Apple story is, the happier I am, just because, it's what I do for a living is talk about Apple. So, when the story's good, I feel slightly better. We'll do a few of the questions and answer bits in a moment. I want to remind you really quickly, though, about a show that I have coming up tomorrow. I was very excited to talk to iMore's Stephen Warwick about what's going on with Zoom. Now, understand, he is not a security guy. His whole life is not studying Zoom. But when I went to look up the whole Zoom story, soup to nuts, starting with, hey, here's this thing called Zoom. Hey, this thing called Zoom is incredibly invasive. Hey, we're all using Zoom now. Over and over again, I saw Stephen's name turn up in articles that he had written. And I, talked to him before for the show The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And so when I was just wondering, hey, wait a minute, we're all using Zoom. Did all those problems get fixed? I thought Stephen would be a good person to call. So I called him and we talked. And tomorrow morning, checklist number 216, Zooming into 2021, should be in your various podcast feeds. You're looking for The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. Also, he's from across the pond. Yeah, so he's got some accent. I don't know where it's from. It's not Belgium. I know that. He's from someplace in over there. So it's a great voice to listen to as well. Anyway, the show is called The Checklist. You're looking for number 216, Zooming into 2021. You can find that wherever you get podcasts, or you can go to the show's site, securemac.com/checklist, and you'll find notes there, and you can listen right there. And won't that be nice? So I think there were 4 questions that I wanted to hit. There were a lot more than 4 questions. For the amount of stuff that they talked about, they seemed to sort of get through the prepared remarks fairly quickly. Questions and answers went a little bit longer than they normally do, which is why, like, the last guy was like, "Hey, can you talk about this again?" It was sort of like calling for an encore, but not really. But here are some of the questions that interested me. B of A analyst Wamsi Mohan talked about the fact that iPhone exceeded expectations despite the late launch. Luca Maestri said that it had to do with the fact that it's just a fantastic product lineup. He talked about the fact that the Pro and the Pro Max are doing particularly well. They had to, of course, get them out quickly because they were 4 weeks in before they released the iPhone 12 and iPhone 12 Pro, and they were 7 weeks into the quarter before they released the iPhone Mini and iPhone 12 Pro Max. The iPhone Mini was not mentioned. The iPhone 12 was mentioned, but it's kind of hard to know whether they were talking about the iPhone 12 or they were talking about the iPhone 12 family. The Pro and the Pro Max got called out a couple of times. There is particular strength for those in China, according to Luca Maestri, some of which could have had to do with pent-up demand for 5G iPhones. Going into March, they are very optimistic. They should be at supply-demand balance for all models sometime this quarter, and things are going very well around the world. Now, when Shannon Cross asked a question about China, I mean, she said that the iPhone was obviously a huge part of that, but what else was there in China? That is. Tim Cook talked about the fact that it was more than an iPhone story, and then he talked mostly about the iPhone. The thing that I found most interesting, so all of last year, on In a Few Minutes, with a number of different people that I talked to, we were trying to figure out whether Apple would actually do a 5G iPhone this year. I think I even talked on this show about, what 5G, and this show started in September. So before they had announced the high-speed iPhone, I mean, we were all sort of accepted at that point that it was going to be a 5G iPhone. We still kind of wondered among people that I was talking to, why exactly? Because 5G wasn't ubiquitous. Like Apple waited to do a 3G iPhone until 3G was ubiquitous in the country. They waited to do 4G until 4G was practically ubiquitous. Then they came with 5G, and 5G is like, yeah, it's here, it's there, it's a few different places. It's China. And that's interesting to think about. Kind of depressing, kind of interesting, what our place is in the rest of the world at this point. We are not diminished because of, politics or because we're awful people to each other sometimes. As far as Apple is concerned, not as far as Apple is concerned, I shouldn't say that. I'm inferring a lot. But they went ahead with a 5G iPhone without 5G being ready here in the States, something they did not do with 4G, something they did not do with 3G, but because China was waiting around tapping its foot going, so are you guys going to come out with a 5G iPhone or what? 5G is well established in China, so there was some level of anticipation, according to Apple CEO Tim Cook. He didn't say we went ahead because China was ready, even if everybody else isn't. But if you think about it, the other things, by the way, the iPad, the Mac, wearables, home, and accessories, all of those things were above company average in China. And that's sort of they're not exactly post-COVID, but they're kind of post-COVID, is basically what he said. They're in the recovery stage. There are some reports of recurrence this quarter. They're not seeing that in their business. They're hearing about small pockets of it. I think he mentioned that because once again, Apple did not provide guidance. They provided color going forward, but they did not provide guidance because they say we're still dealing with a lot of uncertainty tied to COVID-19 globally. Bernstein research analyst Tony Sacconaghi did not disappoint. He wants to know about growth and sources for growth. He thinks that Apple is going to hit over $300 billion in revenue this fiscal year. He wants to know if Apple is interested in buying some big stuff, maybe, and could you talk about how it is you're going to grow over the next 5 years? And you will never guess what Tim Cook said. I'm not talking about 5 years. He didn't call him a dope, which is good because that would have been bad form. I'm not calling him a dope. I'm just saying if you ask Tim Cook about next quarter, he's going to say, we don't talk further than the quarter that we're in. But please, let me tell you about 5 years from now. What he did say is that Apple has the strongest product portfolio ever. They have a strong pipeline. They have an installed base that's hit new heights. They're attracting upgraders and switchers. Almost sounded like an equal portions on a lot of the different categories. Services keep growing. Wearables have gone from zero to the size of a Fortune 120 company in the last few years, basically since they introduced Apple Watch, and we're still in the early stages of wearables. So they're huge, and we're what, bottom of the second, maybe on that. iPhone, Mac, and iPad, there's still headroom for those, especially in emerging markets. Look at India, he said. Business doubled there, but it's still very small compared to the size of the opportunity there. And there are plenty of other markets like India, is what he said, which is interesting because here we were 10 years ago looking at China going, man, that's going to be big. And then China started to grow, and people are like, wow, look at India. That's going to be big one day. He says there are other markets like it. Okay, I'll be curious to hear which ones we're talking about, but it's going to be a few years because, of course, India is still picking up. They're also picking up traction in the enterprise. They're very optimistic in the enterprise, and there are new things that they're not going to talk about, Mr. What's going on in the next 5 years. So that was interesting. Two more questions to get through. Samik Chatterjee, JP Morgan analyst, congratulated. Lots of congratulations. Remember when that used to happen? Every quarter, they would say, hey, congratulations, here's my question. A couple of people actually, after their question, said congratulations, which is always interesting to hear. He wanted to know about customer engagement for iPhone outside of the US and China, where basically 5G is not yet, or not prevalent anyway. He was asking specifically about Europe. Tim Cook did acknowledge that Europe is not big on 5G compared to China or the US. Korea is doing very well as far as 5G penetration. He said he sees the world as sort of a patchwork where 5G is concerned. So there are places like, China, the US, Korea, where coverage is excellent. Then there are places where it exists, but it's sort of patchy. And then there are places where it doesn't exist. Latin America, there's not much in the way of 5G. So there's plenty of headroom ahead, which I find kind of interesting. What I wish they had addressed was, are people going ahead and buying iPhone 12 anyway, even if they don't have 5G? Or are they going with a lower price phone because without 5G, they're not seeing the benefit of that? Nobody asked that question, unfortunately. So we get to wait for another 3 months, and maybe somebody will ask then. Because they give out a number at the end, but I'm not going to call it because who am I? And also, they didn't answer it on the call, so it's not like they're going to answer my call. Anyway, he says in Europe, most of the growth is in front of them as far as 5G, which again is kind of weird to me because I just sort of assume that people who are buying a new iPhone are buying the next new iPhone. Like when it's time for me to buy my next iPhone, I will be getting whatever the next iPhone is. I mean, unless things change drastically, then I might start looking back, further. But I'm still thinking the next iPhone I get will be the next iPhone that's available. Whether I go Pro, Pro Max, or whatever, I don't know. But maybe that's because I do the Apple thing. Maybe the average consumer in Europe sees the iPhone 12 and says, yeah, but I don't have the 5G, so talk to me about that 10R over there. The last call was Jim Suva. Gentleman Jim Suva from Citigroup. He said it's amazing how they pivoted. He wanted to know about active efforts in India specifically. And again, Tim Cook, it's really interesting because he keeps wanting to say, and maybe this is because he's on a call with a bunch of analysts, he keeps wanting to say, look, there are lots of markets out there where we've got room. What's funny, though, is he even said here in the States, they got plenty of room. India is one of the markets, but they're really up everywhere, and there's still room for growth all over the place. Yes, the online store went live in India a couple of quarters ago. Last quarter was the first full quarter for that, and it's doing well. There are retail stores in their future in India. They're also developing the channel. So, like, third-party resellers, they're still working with those as well because, yeah, they've got an online store. And yes, they're planning on building retail stores, but you're talking about close to a billion people. How many stores are they going to have to start? Two? There are still other places to sell. Even in developed markets, though, when you look at share, and then he laughed and he was like, not everybody here has an iPhone, certainly. So there's headroom left even in the developed markets. Of course, the question there is, okay, there's headroom and there's growth, but there's growth and then there's growth. I wonder what kind of year we would be looking at for Apple if not for the pandemic, if not for everybody running inside, because we had to, because they didn't want to get sick. There was something that I missed in one of those questions, but it will be on tomorrow's macOS Ken, where people are like, so the Mac and the iPad, especially the iPad, that's being driven by work from home and learn at home. Once that's saturated, what do you do? And I wouldn't say that Tim Cook got defensive, but he was basically like, the iPad's actually a great product. Yes, a lot of it does have to do with the fact that people are maybe using them as laptop replacements, but some people are also using them just to like augment their computing life. And we're doing good work on that product. So, okay, some of it's because people are working from home, some of it is because of students learning from home, but some of it's because we're doing good things with iPad. I mean, yes, but come on, those numbers. Anyway, that was a bit all over the place. It will be much more succinct on tomorrow's macOS Ken. So if you want a more thorough read or a more thorough address, or things that don't go halfway through, you want to be sure to check out tomorrow's macOS Ken. That'll hit in the morning. So will the checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. Excited about that show. Hope you check it out. And of course, we'll be back here tomorrow afternoon talking about something. Maybe analyst reactions. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we could just talk about how our days are going. If you're in the chat room, please stay in the chat room. I will be by there momentarily. If you're not in the chat room, it's one of the things that we do. We do this show, and then we have almost a whole other show that happens after this show, and we would love it if you would join us. It is live, youtube.com/KenRay, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, Monday through Friday. However we talk, we will talk soon. And I usually say I will talk to you soon there, so I'll just, say bye. But not to you people in the chat room. I'm just saying hello to you. And there's the end of the show marker, which means the show is officially over. And now the song is over now. There's lots of debate going on in the chat room that I'll bet I'm curious to see what you guys are talking about. Going back up. Whoop, went too far. Went way too far. There we go. Hey, thanks, Bill. Bill says congratulations on 15 years. Thank you very much. Crazy great Apple numbers. It's true. Glitch, glitch, glitch. Glitches? No. What? It wasn't here. Video's wonky. Oh, great. Everybody had trouble today. Yay. Okay, everybody was having a problem and then it got fixed for everybody. I don't know if it was something that happened here. Sorry. Anyway. Uh, Smoke Eater, I think it's Tim. Fastest 5G is still in the States. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I think the millimeter wave, yes, but again, it's not everywhere in the States. It's like if you're downtown next to some places they put it. Africa is interesting. Africa is an interesting idea. That feels really far future, but then again, what are we talking about really far future? 10 years, 15 years, maybe? Which is not as far future as it used to be. Hey, Yogi Berra, everybody. The future. It's not what it used to be. Wow, I think we're at the end already. Okay, that's weird. That happened fast. Did I miss something? No. All right. Well, cool. I like the Queen and Blackadder. That was what was her name? Miranda Richardson played Queen Elizabeth I in the Blackadder. The second one. I guess I'm gonna go turn this into a thing unless anybody's got anything else. A lot of listening. Okay. Fast Wednesday. I guess so, John. I don't know. You want to talk about the weather? It's still cold. Not much talking. You were listening. Great show. Thank you very much because I felt like, thank you. I'm not going to say what I felt like. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Tomorrow will be more whatever. It was an interesting call. It was a fun call. So, yeah. And Webb says it was a good show. So there we go. Snow. Where is snow, Donna? Tell me another time. All right, everybody. I'm going to bounce. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Should we all listen to the call? Asked John. I don't know. Is that your thing? I've been listening to them for 16 years now. So, snow in the Nashville area. That seems crazy. I don't know. I just read you I read you the stirring stuff that Tim Cook said. The thing is, he's got a really great speechwriter, or whoever writes that. If he writes it himself, that's fine. He doesn't practice it, but I mean, the words are stirring. So I don't know. The thing is, when I bring you the stuff that I bring you on macOS Ken, I'm bringing stuff that is like that I can get my head around, and also the stuff that I find interesting, which is why I always say at the end of it, there's plenty more where that came from. Grab the podcast, whatever. I personally have a hard time listening to Luca Maestri because he's very much reading without inflection. And he, also talks about high finance stuff that I, after however many years of watching it, still don't get. I get as exhaustive as I get before I get exhausted. So if you want a deep dive, yes, I would say listen to the call, or read all the blogs or something. That's what I would say. Tigers do bounce. It's true. They're bouncy, fun. Right? Take care, everybody. I'm going to go do a thing and then do some more things. I'll talk to you tomorrow.